every historical period has its challenges. We must understand that this, because this is a critical point. Every historical period has its challenges. There are historical periods where an impressionistic, perhaps, tafsir of the Quran, basically the alfaz of Quran, what the words mean, could suffice, because if you are living in a historical period in which there are many educational institutions that can do the job, then not every scholar that approaches the Quran. But we are living in a historical period where alienation from not just the Quran, but from the language of the Quran. So there's an alienation from Arabic as a language. I was reading something, interestingly enough, it was something about the recent Dune movie. And it struck me that the author was talking about whether Arabic will be a language 100 years from now, and the author of that article was very sure that Arabic is going to be a dead language 100 years from now, that it's one of the dying languages. And if you know enough about the Arab world, you also know that there is a serious problem vis-a-vis the language of the Quran, Arabic as a language, the language of the Quran itself, vis-a-vis Islamic sources, vis-a-vis being sufficiently sufficient ثقافة, or a sufficient intellectual knowledge of everything related to the Islamic past. Everything has become reduced to these broad sweeping generalizations. So this historical period, as I've said in the past several times, the jihad of this historical period is a jihad of knowledge. We Muslims are in such dire straits that what is required of a scholar today is far more demanding than what was required of a scholar writing in the 4th century. But so having said that, what often has struck me is that the best commentaries on the Quran, the commentaries by people like Shanqiti, or people like Zamakhshari or Razi or Qurtubi, their biblical literacy is actually surprises me. It is clear that they've read the Bible, and it is clear that they know enough to be able to reference the Bible. And that is something that if you read the modern tafsir, is completely absent. So if you are going to, if you are going to say that I really commit myself to a scholarship of the Quran, it is imperative that your intellect, because brain is like a muscle in the body that it's that needs if it's exercised, it's strong. If it's not exercised, it's weak. Your brain has to be exposed to far more than just the Islamic tradition. Your brain has to be exposed to languages. Your brain has to be exposed to non-Islamic sources. Your brain has to be nuanced in the difference between an Islamic source written in the 1st century Hijrah and an Islamic source written in the 4th century Hijrah, and an Islamic source written in the 12th century Hijrah. So the challenge is that what is demanded of us is very serious, the type of serious commitment to knowledge that could uplift a people from being a broken and defeated people to people actually making a contribution to anything. And that does require a very serious investment in knowledge. I mean, if what are we investing in? All people in the world, they rise and fall. This is the nature of civilizations. And then people decide to invest in things. So what are we investing in as Muslims? Investing in learning the sciences, math, chemistry, and so on. Well, whatever investments we're doing in this, in the Muslim world, we are not making original contributions. So we're just investing to imitate. Okay. So what are we investing in? Building of nice mosques and people who can, I don't know, put Islamic texts on computers. I mean, it's really a puzzling thing, is that the amount of investment in the processes of knowledge is woefully inadequate. How many Muslim scholars of Sharia or Quran can comfortably read 5 languages? Why is it needed? Because someone who has been exposed to human thought across several human experiences, their brain works very differently than someone that only knows a myopic human experience and can't transcend it. The way they think of, and this is God's speech, for God's sake. This is the creator of all the languages and all the people and all the histories and everything. So when I approach this author, my attitude should be, I want to learn as much about your creation as I can humanly, and I should feel really bad about the fact that I am not a genius and I can learn, 20 languages and 10 more different cultures and 10 more different histories, because I take very seriously the fact that this is God, the creator of everything, and everything means everything. And so I dip into as much of it as I can. So this is a long-winded way of saying, I know I've been saying this all my, as long as I can remember. And I know that the tendency is to hear someone like me and to say, to just say, he just likes to complicate things and so on. But as long as this remains our attitude, we will never emerge as shuhada an-nas, as witnesses upon him. It's just, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, everything is according to what you invest in. And it's not that. So, but you're absolutely right that this is, in terms of comparative, I mean, how often does the Quran talk to non-Muslims? By definition, this places you in a comparative frame. Because either the Quran is talking to non-Muslims, but not really, not seriously. So it really doesn't have anything to say to non-Muslims. But if you take it seriously, then, absolutely, if I'm talking to, at least in a serious context, someone, to Christian, and I'm saying something about what the Quran says about Jesus. And often the attitude, and by the way, this is among the things that drove me in Surah Al-Baqarah, is that, whatever you say about especially this is my experience. Well, no, actually, my experience was both Christians and Jews, is that you don't really understand our tradition. You don't really understand the Trinity. You don't really, whatever claims the Quran is making about what Christians believe, oh, that's not accurate. Well, how am I gonna even engage you in anything? You're telling me that the Quran is wrong, both about Jews and Christians and everything. That's not. So how am I going to engage you unless I actually know something, and not just something, but study your tradition so well that I even know more about Jewish theology than the vast majority of Jewish scholars, and know more about Christian theology than the vast majority of Christian scholars. And I can engage in conversations with you which puts the other person, make them realize that they can't speak down to me, this racial colonial element. They can no longer speak down to me as a Muslim, that they have to deal with me as a peer. That I am going to talk to you about the ins and outs of different theologies of the Trinity in a way that's going to force you to take me as an equal. That's the only way that comparative anything can progress. As long as, my experience, and this is another thing that, drove this journey, is that my experience whenever I would be invited to anything involving comparative anything with Islam, that as a Muslim, I was always spoken down to. I was never at par, even with someone like Maimonides, who, it is mind-numbing for people to speak to me as if what Maimonides brought to the table is just something that I, as a Muslim, can never relate to. It is mind-boggling. But that is an experience I've had so many times. And I would go, and it got so frustrating that you go back to the drawing table and say, okay, what's needed? Latin, fine. Hebrew, fine. Aramaic, Syriac, fine. Reading this theologian, reading this school of thought, reading... But it takes a lot of transparency. I mean, it takes... you have to admit to yourself that, yes, they're being nice to you, yes, they're inviting you, but not because they respect you. I mean, this is the hardest thing to admit to yourself, like in academia, because, you get an invitation, you go, everyone is being nice to you, they're treating you with, with respect and everything, but to admit to yourself that what you're saying about Islam is there just as a gap filler, but no one is engaging Islamic anything seriously, because no one thinks that Islam has to contribute anything intellectually rigorous or serious, and that everyone expects you to present your material in your ghetto field, in your little ghetto space. I know it is one of the hardest things for, especially an academic, to admit, but admitting it is liberating if you're going to do something about it. And I could just go on for example after example after example in my career. I would, and I've been, invited to all the typical prestigious things that make a resume look good, but where any of these invitations, or the vast majority, for a long time in my career at least, the irony of it is that once it became clear that I am no gap filler, and I would start, the invitations became far less. And I'm sorry, but this is a racial colonial issue that, is another topic. But the word got around that, this is not a Muslim nice boy that's just going to, you know, um, when you start arguing with people about what scholars of Judaism have said about the scholar that they're citing, and saying, yeah, but he was criticized for this, and well, he misread this source, and and so on and so forth, it becomes a different dynamic. And I don't know. I'm obviously not going to see it in my lifetime, because I think I'm just going to be out of time. But I've dreamt of, just the transparency and honesty that Muslims would just admit to themselves that
I remember when you were having a conversation with Bernard Lewis in Washington, D.C. in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it was hosted by I think it was a Jewish organization, right? Like a think tank or something.
Right.
And
One of them. Yeah.
Somehow you overheard someone refer to you as a work in progress.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? So, and interestingly, it was like, it was a conversation. It was like at one of the, I can't remember, national journalism center or something like that. It was a big deal, and it was interesting because the way that Bernard Lewis conversed with you, he chose to agree with you. Like, he would find whatever he could agree with you so as not to engage you.
Yeah.
And so it was a really it was a very low impact kind of conversation that was useful for them on their side, but it was very interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, he whatever I said, he agreed with, just to neutralize me.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually said that I'm not being taken seriously. You are agreeing with everything I say, but ignoring the normative direction of my argument. But anyway, with that work in progress comment, they were discussing whether I am, quote unquote, a good Muslim or a lost cause. One of them. And Bernard Lewis said, and I overheard it because, well, they were speaking in Hebrew. And he said that Khaled is not to be trusted right now, but he's a work in progress. And meant that, maybe he will turn out to be a Muslim who says the right things and do the right things. And Grace knows about it because it's one of the times that I was very upset, and Grace said, "What's wrong?" And I told her, "This is all a sham. This is just these people. It's just a sham. This is about getting a native informant, working to prepare a native informant to be a native informant, and not about any serious intellectual or moral engagement. All the degrees, all the accolades, it didn't matter. It was, yeah. So."